All right, I will say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. We have the great Zuchos today. To Mesillas Hashem, begin Perek Chav Dalet, chapter 24, Mesillas Yesharim. The Ramchal writes this fast. Oh, 1 second. Ramchal writes this fast. Chaver on Zoom, you hear me all right? Excellent. So Ramchal says as follows. Hine, Ra'osenu Hamida Azos. Say thank you. Hine, Ra'osenu Hamida Azos. He says, now remember, we are starting today in Mesillas Hashem a brand new parak, a brand new midah. And you can see the title over here is Bebeir Yiras Hachet. So the midah we're talking about over here is the fear of sin. The fear of sin. So let's analyze this. Hine, Ra'osenu Hamida Hazos, Nimnis Achar Kol Hamidos Hatovos Asher Zacharnu Adheno. There's a reason that this particular midah comes after everything that we've learned beforehand. He says, "Asher dailanu la'irena al nyana, sheroishiev v'ada inyan nichbad v'ikari ma'od v'kasha lahasig oso, shekvar lo yuchal lahasig elov, elami shekvar hisig kolamidos shekadam zircham." So we'll say, remember again, let's take a step back. The beauty of Mesillas Yesharim is not simply that it is a fantastic sefer with incredible insights, but that it is a systematic, incremental, but chronological process of growth. In other words, the way this sefer is arranged, based on the teachings of Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, who, by the way, the son-in-law of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. So Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair took these various midos and he said, here's what you do. You start here, then you go here, then you go here, then you go here. And there's a way to build the self, midah after midah. So what the Ramchal points out is the fact that Yiras Hachet is pretty much at the end of this progression. Right? It's pretty much at the end of this progression. Again, we're not finished yet. There's one more rung to the ladder. One more rung to the ladder afterwards. But the fact that this is so far to the end of the ladder indicates to us that this is a complicated midah to acquire. Right? That this is not simply something that one could acquire without effort. Without effort. Rather, again, he goes on, he says, Amdam, Tzarch Shenaktim. Therefore, halacha l'maaseh, again, we have to go ahead and preface this by saying, Kimine ha'yira, heim shtayim shem shlosha. In general, again, yira, when it comes to yira, there are two different types of yira, which in reality kind of branch off into three different types of yira. So we'll say, let's analyze. In other words, really what we're going to see is there's two primary parts to yira sachet, to fear of sin. One of those branches has two sub-branches as well. So he says as follows, Harishona kalamod lasiga. The first form of yira is relatively easy to acquire. Ein davar kal kamahu. The truth is, Ramchal says, there's actually nothing easier in the world than to acquire this first form of yira, which we'll define in just a moment. Vashniya, but the second form of yira, kasha v'achilik hasheni min hasheni. So we'll say the second form of yira is even more difficult, and the second part of yira is even more difficult. Okay, so obviously we don't know what he's talking about, but Lamaisi, here's what I do know. What I do know is that there's two parts, two chalokim, two parts to acquiring the midah of yiras hachet, fear of sin. There's part one, there's part two. Part two itself has two sub-parts. Part one is easier to acquire. Part two is harder to acquire. And part two of part two is the hardest thing to acquire. Okay, so now let's fill in the blanks over here. Ushleimusa, kimoking, shleimus kadlad mot. Yesh say here, what's the first form of yira? And this is the most simple, elementary form of yira. Yesh yiras ha'onesh. V'zeh min harishon. The first element of yira that we're going to discuss is fear of punishment. Yiras ha'onesh, fear of punishment. V'yesh yiras haromimus. V'zehu min hasheni. And ultimately, again, then there's yiras haromimus. So what's yiras haromimus? So if we literally translate it, it means fear of the awesomeness or greatness of God. Fear of the awesomeness of Yiras Haromis, fear of the awesomeness and greatness of God. Or it could also simply be translated, as we'll see, as reverence. Profound reverence of the Ribono Shel Olam. Again, we'll get into a more precise definition ultimately when we actually delve into it. And he goes on, then he says, Yiras Haromimos v'zeh min hasheni, sheyiras hachet chelik sheni mimenu. In Yiras Haromimos, the second part of Yiras Haromimos is Yiras Hachet, fear of sin, which again, this will make a lot more sense when we actually get into concrete definitions. Let's now begin to actually discuss these different forms of Yira and the distinctions between them. So it says, go back to Yiras HaOnesh. So remember, the first form of Yira, the first level of Yira, Yiras HaOnesh, fear of punishment. What is that? Exactly what it sounds like. Kipshuta. Literally, again, it means fear of punishment. He says, Sha'adam Yira me'avor es pi Hashem elokav, mebnei ha'anoshim asher la'averos. Why does a person not transgress? So I'll say, why does a person A, not transgress averos, and B, keep mitzvahs? Why? He doesn't want a punishment. That's it. That's it. A very simple, almost infantile relationship with Hashem, or more childish. I don't mean infantile like to belittle it, but again, it's a more elementary form of relationship with the Ribono Shel Olam. I don't want to get patched. I don't want to get punished, right? And therefore, again, I'm going to do what it is that I need to do. Im laguf ve'im lanefesh. I don't want my body to get punished. In other words, I recognize that every single action in this world carries with it a repercussion. So I don't want any forms of physical punishment for averos that I do, nor do I want anything to happen to my neshama in the afterlife. I don't want any kind of punishment. V'hinei zos, kala vadai. And then Ramchal says in general, this is generally an easy form of yira to acquire. Why? Because there's such a great line. Ki kol adam ohev es asmo. Because I will say, every person loves himself. Now, the truth is, unfortunately, it's actually not true, right? Unfortunately, there are people who don't love themselves and don't like themselves, which is an incredibly tragic thing. But what Ramchal is saying is, in general, people look out for their self-interests. That's what he means. So therefore, again, if I understand that by doing averos, that's going to carry with it certain repercussions. By doing averos, that's going to bring with it certain liability. I don't want that. I don't want that. I don't want to get punished in Olam Hazeh. I don't want to get punished in Olam Haba. I don't want it. And therefore, again, I will avoid behaviors and activities that ultimately could generate punishment liability. Why? Because I care about myself. And I will say, in general, there's nothing that keeps us from preventing averos more than yira. And I will say, I want to be clear. Remember, he's saying that this is the quote-unquote lowest level, but it's an absolutely necessary level. In other words, he's not belittling it, saying this is nothing. He's saying that this is the starting point, right? This is the launching pad. Yiras HaOnesh is the simplest way to begin to cultivate a sense of yira, because no one wants to get punished. And I will say, by the way, this is true. The concept of Yiras HaOnesh, fear of punishment, is actually a dynamic which exists in every single life relationship, right? Why does a person do what they're supposed to do? Why does a person do what they're supposed to do in a marriage? Why do I do what I'm supposed to do? So again, of course, there's love, and there's commitment, and there's all the positive thing. And what else is there? There's a fear that if I don't do what I need to do in this marriage, chas v'shalom, I could lose it. Or if I do something I'm not supposed to do in the marriage, I could lose it. That's Yiras HaOnesh. So it's not just by Hashem. It's everything, right? I might like my job a lot. So why do I show up to work every day? Okay, it might be because I like my job. And no one likes their job every single day, right? So we'll say, so at the end of the day, so why do I show up? Because I don't want to lose my job. So Yiras HaOnesh, fear of repercussion is a fundamental cornerstone in every single life relationship. There's no such thing as building a relationship without a fear of repercussions. So when it comes to Avodas Hashem, I believe HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of course, is the be-all, end-all. And the Gemara says, if you say that Hashem just overlooks things, right? The Gemara says it's not true. It's not true. Literally, your insides should spill out, which means there is a din v'cheshbon for every single thing that we do. I don't want to get punished in this world or the next. Therefore, I will do what's expected of me. V'lanoshim asher daitan kala. So it's interesting. He says this yira, he says it's good ultimately again for people who are unlearned. Ach eina yiras hachachamim va'anshe hadas. But this is not the yira of the chachamim, of the wise people, and people who have more advanced or refined intellect. Now I will say, just to be clear, what does Ramchal mean when he says that this is the yira of the Ami Haaretz? What he means is that very often for Amei Haaretz, and the reason he includes women over here in Amei Haaretz is because of course, the concept of education for women, and Baruch Hashem, advanced education for women is a relatively new phenomenon for Klal Yisrael. So often, again, it was understood that a woman was not educated. So I will say, so again, what does he mean when he says that this is the Yira for Amei Haaretz? What he means is that this is where Amei Haaretz stop. He's not saying only Amei Haaretz have this and people who are more refined don't have it. It means Amei Haaretz, when they're cultivating a sense of Yiras HaChet, they start and they stop with this. So that what he calls the Chachamim and Anshe Hadas recognize you need to start with it. Everyone needs Yiras HaOnesh as a starting point. The difference is, don't let your Yiddishkeit stop there. The goal is to refine it and to build it into something more significant afterwards. All right, we'll stop over here for today. Right? Say, this is where it ends. This is where it ends today, right? Okay, good. Shkach, we'll pick up over here in Mesillas Yesharim tomorrow.